This flooding event has offered critical insights for the future management and leadership of complex and unpredictable emergencies in New Zealand's super city and beyond. As reviewers, we were tasked by the Mayor of Auckland to undertake an independent, rapid review of 4 dimensions of Auckland Council's emergency management response over the first 48 hours of this event. Those 4 dimensions were, firstly, the performance of Auckland emergency management and emergency services, the declaration of the state of emergency, communications with partner agencies, central government, elected members, and of course, the public. Decision-making, procedures, and communication templates. We did so by reviewing relevant records and interviewing those who had roles to play on that Friday and over the weekend that followed. The team also reviewed video recordings of every incident management team meeting. There were 6 recordings of approximately 1 hour each. This review was an exercise to determine how well the system operated under the extreme stress of the initial response stages of this flood event. It was not a formal or forensic investigation. The lessons are as follows. Auckland Council's emergency management systems, its operating model and the relevant plans, policies and procedures was not prepared for magnitude or speed. Gaps in preparedness, including for flood and superstorm emergencies, were known to key council decision makers in advance. At the time of this flood event, they remained work in progress. Relationship and communication protocols between the key players at Auckland Council with CDEM roles, including the Mayor, Chair of the Council's CDEM Committee, Chief Executive and Emergency Management staff, were not sufficiently inclusive in the critical early stages of this event. Senior leaders underestimated the importance of their visible leadership, which had an adverse effect on communications and public confidence. The Council's emergency management team appeared to lack the command, crisis leadership skills and operational experience to deal with an event of this complexity. Critical Council emergency management roles and delegations were unclear, both within the Council and to partner response agencies. The crisis exposed weaknesses in the Council's emergency management systems, community, tangata whenua relationships, which slowed the response and led to an inadequate and early intelligence to support public safety information and decision making. Rather than a model based on central planning and localised delivery, the Council's emergency response was premised largely on centralised coordination and delivery of response. This weakened the localised intelligence flows that could have supported better targeted community responses. These problems aligned to create system deficiencies, particularly in the initial 12 hours. Aucklanders did not receive the timely communications, leadership and practical support they had the right to expect in a crisis of this magnitude. Many of these problems were known in advance, which is troubling. From 2016 onwards, the Council's Auckland CDEM group plan recognised the issues that Auckland faced as a result of infrequent testing and lack of understanding of its emergency response frameworks. The plan raised the concern that Auckland's capability to respond to a large-scale or widespread event, such as occurred on 27 to 29 January, had not been tested. and that operational emergency management plans were not sufficient. The need to develop specific contingency plans for flood and superstorm events was also identified. Yet by the time of this event, some of the key issues that had been identified had not been actioned by the Council's executive. Nor does it appear that the CDM committee demanded that they be prioritised and actioned. In 2018, the Small report into earlier weather events made a number of related recommendations which also do not appear to have been fully implemented. Our report suggests several specific areas in which the operating model for Auckland emergency management can be improved. Most importantly, however, the issues of leadership exposed by this crisis must be addressed. Key leaders in Auckland Council failed to appreciate the vital importance of visible leadership and frequent public communication during a time of crisis. Effective leadership in a crisis goes directly to public confidence in elected leaders and thus to the overall health of our democratic institutions. Within Auckland Council, there was an opportunity for better advice and support to the Mayor's office both before and during the event, by the Chief Executive and his officials to provide leadership information and assurance to the public during emergencies. During the weather emergency, the Mayor and his team should also have been more active in demanding information and asking questions of the Chief Executive, his officials and the emergency management team. All those in key roles needed to view and react to the developing emergency through both a strategic leadership and tactical response lens. Doing so may well have resulted in an earlier declaration of emergency. As the night of Friday, January 27 unfolded, Aucklanders expected and needed clear and regular messaging, delivered with empathy via multiple channels to understand the seriousness of the event, to know where to go and how to get help, and to gain assurance that the crisis was being actively managed by their elected and professional leaders. The timing of the declaration of emergency was another topic of our review. We're confident that the Mayor issued a declaration of emergency immediately after he was advised it was requested by emergency services. However, we consider that the request for an emergency declaration could and should have been made earlier in the evening. I do need to be clear on this point, as there are some public misconceptions about the significance of a declaration. An earlier declaration of emergency would not have directly affected the operational response from emergency services on the night, given they were already fully deployed and responding to the event, and had communicated that they did not require any emergency powers at that point. However, in our view, an earlier declaration during daylight hours, accompanied by an emergency text alert, would have assisted the operational response and increased public safety by ensuring that Aucklanders understood the seriousness of the event. A problem was that Auckland emergency management lacked sufficient situational awareness about what was happening on the ground, and so in turn were not able to advise the Mayor about the circumstances that gave rise to the need for a declaration. We also consider that the advice to the Mayor about whether to issue a declaration was unnecessarily focused on whether emergency services required emergency powers. These findings should not be seen to denigrate the well-intentioned efforts of the Auckland emergency management staff, who were doing their best under difficult circumstances, as were the partner agencies and first responders, along with community leaders, volunteers and many ordinary Aucklanders who did extraordinary things to help their fellow citizens. They were the true heroes of this event. It will be vital going forward that leaders not only continue to prioritise improvements, but are also able and prepared to invest in these. The Auckland Emergency Management Team in particular needs support to embed the changes that will ensure improved future responses to unpredicted emergencies. This flood event has been an important wake-up call for Auckland Council and its civil defence and emergency management systems. Severe weather events are becoming more severe with climate change. Disasters often happen without warning. The review panel have made 17 recommendations that should be commenced as soon as possible. 2 as a matter of urgency. A separate review to examine Auckland Emergency Management's prevention, preparedness and plan, also known as readiness and reduction, for an emergency in Tāmaki Makaurau. The current review of the Auckland Civil Defence and Emergency Management Group plan to be finalised. Aucklanders deserve and should expect a plan for remedial action in order to ensure that these system deficiencies are not replicated and Auckland is better prepared for the next emergency event which could occur at any time.